Welcome back, everybody. So here we are with issue 3, and we're going to do some bonus information from issue 3. So um, we got a little bit of info about the INCOM T65 X-Wing, and there's some interesting stuff in here about this, and so um, I'm kind of excited about going through this. So let's just go ahead and get going on the specifications for it. So the length is 12.5 meters, and the MGLT is 100 MGLT. Again, I don't know what MGLT is, but I can tell you that the Falcon was only 75 MGLT. So for what it's worth, I'll have to figure out what that MGLT is. Um, the maximum speed in atmosphere is 1,050 kilometers per hour, which incidentally is the same as the Millennium Falcon. So but it can go higher if the shields are on. So the engine units are 4 INCOM, 4L4 or 4J4 fusel thrust engines. It's hyperdrive is a class 1, and it doesn't have a backup. The hyperdrive system is an INCOM GBK 585 hyperdrive unit, and it uses the Novel Dex 04Z cryogenic power cell for its power plant. So that's pretty interesting. So uh, some of the interesting things I found about this was um, basically how the ship came to be with with the rebels. So this part up here I thought was rather interesting. Um, Ironically, the Independent Income Corporation originally designed the X-Wing for sale to the Imperial Navy. However, when the Galactic Empire moved in to take control of INCOM, many of its design and engineering staff defected to the Rebel Alliance. They brought with them 4 prototypes of the new breed of starfighter, together with the blueprints and production know-how, sorry, as well as building their own versions of the new starfighters. The rebels were able to steal more of the ships from INCOM from an INCOM assembly facility prior to the Battle of Yavin. So that's how they were able to get so many X-wings. And of course, we know the story about Luke Skywalker. So he's a farm boy, blah blah blah, and his first actual starship was um, the T-65 X-wing. So here we have um, for the Battle of Yavin, the 12 X-wings of Red Squadron played a pivotal role in the Galactic Civil War, especially at the Battle of Yavin, where Luke Skywalker, flying as Red 5, destroyed the Death Star with the help of the Millennium Falcon. Woohoo! Okay, so we all should know that, right? So the victory came at a heavy price as the entire squadron was wiped out, except for 2 X-wings, flown by Wedge Antilles, who managed to pull out after he sustained some damage. And you know, Luke basically said, pull out of there, Wedge. You can't do any more help back there. And then Wedge pulls out and says, I'm sorry. And then Biggs gets killed. Luke's best friend. So that was pretty interesting. And Luke was just like, oh, okay, Biggs is dead. Whatever. And Luke Skywalker successfully escaped with the thingamabobber. So there was 12 of them supposed to be originally. It looks like a few more than 12. Now, granted, there's some Y-wings in here and whatnot, but originally it was only supposed to be 12, apparently. So the special editions kind of took care of that. Um, so here, this is going to talk about where the rebel base was on Yavin IV. So the real world Masasi temple. Now, if you aren't in the know, the temple that they were staying in on Yavin 4 were known as the Masasi temple, and that's something that goes back in canon for a long, long time, and so that's kind of nice that they brought that in here. So, um, as part of they were part of the Mayan ruins at the Tikal, Guatemala. Long since overgrown by the jungle, the ancient city was rediscovered in 1848 after locals unearthed human skulls whose teeth were studded with jade. The Tikal is a popular tourist destination, and George Lucas chose the location after he saw a poster of the site in a British travel agency during the production of A New Hope. The scenes of the Falcon landing on the moon and the X-wings taking off were filmed from the 20 or 72-meter high structure known as Temple 4 Pyramid, which is interesting. Maybe that's where they got like Yavin 4 from it. I don't know. Which dates from around 720 AD. It is the largest of the six pyramids in the area, and in some shots, the smaller temples 1, 2, and 3 can be seen above the treetops to the east. When the film crew visited in March 1977, Guatemala was in the midst of a 36-year civil war. It's a long ass civil war. After hosting, uh, after hoisting their gear to the top of the temple with pulleys, it is said that they paid locals with beer to guard the equipment for 4 nights. A year later, the huts used by the crew were burned to the ground by real-life rebels. That's kind of cool. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Bespin. So, I didn't do any conversions of any of the specifics here. I figure if you guys want to know what the conversions are, you can kind of figure that out. Um, So it's in the Outer Rim. It seems like a lot of these places in the Outer Rim, which makes sense because Hoth was in the Outer Rim, right? And they were able to fly to Bespin through normal space. Uh, so it's got to be in the Outer Rim too. It couldn't be that far away. It's in the Anoat system. Its orbital position is 1. Uh, so it basically trades in Tabana gas is the big thing. And its core, it's 49,000 light years from the core, which is 15,000 parsecs. So it's a gas giant, which makes sense, and it's 118,000 kilometers in diameter. Now, if you remember right, Earth is only like 12,000 kilometers in diameter, but it is a gas giant, so it makes sense it'd be substantially bigger. Okay, so there were some interesting things here about in this section about Bespin itself. So Bespin has no surface, but only has an uninhabitable core surrounded by layers of metallic gases created by vast gravitational forces and tremendous heat. The heart of the planet is a solid sphere of the metal rethin with a radius of some 6,000 kilometers. Most of the layers above it are deadly to normal life forms and consisting of poisonous materials at an enormous temperature and pressure. The only habitable hab, habitable hab, habitable there we go, I spit it out finally area of the entire planet lies some 150 kilometers down from the cold of space, known as the Bespin Life Zone. This area of drifting clouds is a mere 30 kilometers deep. So that's kind of cool. So as we said, the Tabana gas is what they mine there, and that's really what Cloud City is all about. So let's learn a little bit about Cloud City. So Cloud City is a circular structure, 16.2 kilometers in diameter and 17.3 kilometers tall, floating 60,000 kilometers above Bespin's core Its main function is to harvest Tabana gas by using tractor beams to draw it into internal processing centers in the city's lower levels, while 36,000 repulsor lift engines and tractor beam generators near the bottom keep the city afloat and in position. The upper levels provide offices and housing, while the very highest have hotels and casinos that cater to the luxury tourist trade. Other floating facilities nearby are administered as part of the city. And then, of course, you got the dual sidecar little ship things. So there you go. That's Bespin for you. So talk a little bit about freezing. So they used, if you weren't sure, so they used the carbon freezing to actually preserve the Tabana gas to export it, right? So as part of the transportation, um, and then once when it's at its destination, then they release it. So it wasn't, if you paid attention, it wasn't ever really intended for living bodies, but Vader wanted it tested, and that's why Han got frozen um, in there. And so then we all found out that you could freeze a life form safely in carbonite. So the Bespin rescue. So after Luke battles Darth Vader and learns the truth about his father, he allows himself to fall down Cloud City's reactor shaft, clinging to the underside of the floating platform. He is rescued by the Millennium Falcon crew, which now includes Lando Calrissian. We all know this. Um, but this is a behind the scenes, so let's learn more. Who has come over to the rebel side. To film the scene when Lando emerges from the Falcon's upper hatch underneath the city, a scaled up model of the ship's dorsal hull, measuring some 5 meters across, was created. A small model of Lando was raised up through the miniature hatch using a forklift. The footage was intercut with other shots of Billy D. Williams, who played Calrissian, emerging from the full-size set of the hatch area, which is filmed from inside and out. So yeah, so they actually built a big set and then did some other stuff. Must be from like the faraway shot when you actually see him come up out of there. So yeah. Um, otherwise we just see this. Yeah. So um, this section here talks about the rear cockpit, and basically this is basically saying is that although there's other controls and some of the other parts of the ship, everything can be controlled from within the cockpit to include these controls on the back and all that kind of stuff. So that for the most part that's normal with a YT 1300 freighter. So it's not unique to the Millennium Falcon. So, dressing the cockpit. Londoner Roger Christian won the Academy Award for his set decoration on the first Star Wars film, Episode 4: A New Hope. The relatively low production budget meant that Christian had to find imaginative, cheap ways to make the props, and he said he invented the use of aircraft scrap in movie making. Scrap back then could be bought by weight, and aeroplane parts are light, so truckloads of scrap metal could be bought. Christian recalls that the prop master and other members of the crew, who were all very experienced in the film business, thought he was mad bringing piles of junk, but he was sure that it was going to work. Along with the aircraft parts were other components sourced from cars of the period. Fans have since spent years trying to work out the origins of the cockpit fittings, some of which were custom made and others heavily modified. The passenger seats have been identified as reworked Martin Baker Mk4 ejection seats. That's these ones back there. Um, and while the pilot seats were taken from a Porsche 911 Carrera, Chewbacca's seat had to be mounted lower than Han's because of the considerable difference in their heights. Other parts that have been spotted include Volvo instrument clusters and switchgear. So yeah, apparently the side pieces go along the sides were some of it was Volvo parts. So that's kind of interesting. So here, and it's actually easier, I think, for you guys to read it than it is for me here. So we kind of break this part out. So we have the Navi computer, and we get a breakout down here, and we'll kind of go through that. And then uh, the reinforced bulkhead, that's this part here. We have our data slot, our hyperdrive system status. So apparently the status is just lights. We have subspace engine status, uh, hatch control switch, integrated control panels, um, environmental controls, that's always important, and fuel management. And then if we check out this section here, so we have the security scanner, uh, the event timer. It's always important to time your event. That way you know when to go in and out of hyperspace. The manual override, uh, the mission timer, again another important thing. There's your course selection keys, okay. The holographic astrogation display there. Apparently you must look into it to see that. And then over here we have the main housing. Okay, so that's basically what's inside. So there you go. There's the bulkhead layout on the back. I wonder why they're telling us all about that. So here we go. This is what we did in this episode or this issue, and we put a lot of that together. All right, so shooting the Falcon. This is our last little bit for this bonus series, at least for this bonus issue. So when George Lucas decided that he would have to change the design of the Millennium Falcon from a long, thin rocket ship to a circular craft, the cockpit was the only element from the original plans which survived the last-minute reworking. And for those of you that don't know, the reason why that was it 2001 Space Odyssey or some other movie near the time period had a ship that was very similar in shape, and they didn't know it. They were like basically designing them independently from each other, and somehow they found out about it, and so they had to change up the makeup of the Millennium Falcon because they're way too similar. So that's one of the reasons why they changed it. So we're kind of lucky because otherwise we would have had this big long tube that was going to be the Millennium Falcon. That would have been super boring. Um, the Falcon's unusual outrigger cockpit layout allowed the conical capsule that was originally designed to fit at the end of the vessel's long hull to be retained for Han Solo's ship. The rest of the model under construction at the Industrial Light Magic, which would become the Rebel blockade runner, was given a new style of cockpit with a hammerhead shape. So there you go. It ended up becoming, reworked it a little bit and ended up becoming the blockade runner. The Tantive V, is that was the name, right? Um, Set building work. Fortunately, the original drawings that had been done for the cockpit were still relevant, so the construction of the full-size set continued in the movie studios. Only the cockpit itself was built for close-up interior work. The cockpit attached to the starboard half of the ship, built for the exterior scenes in Mos Eisley Docking Bay 94 and the Death Star hangar, was only a rough mock-up, and separate sets were built for the other interiors. As with other science fiction movies of the time, some of the Falcon's interior sets would not physically fit within the exterior dimensions, and later plans for the Falcon have had to make compromises. One problem this left was a lack of headroom, which rapidly surfaced on set. The designers hadn't fully allowed for the 2.18-meter high height of actor Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca. On the first shoot, Mayhew found that he couldn't fit into the seat provided for him. In some scenes, Han's Wookiee co-pilot was edited into the sequences afterwards, while the set itself was modified for others. Cockpit mascot. And one detail that caused amusement when it was first noticed on scene is a small pair of metal cubes, the little dice that everybody's so excited about. If you saw Solo, you'd know what those are. Briefly glimpsed hanging in the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon when Chewbacca makes preparations to part Mos Eisley. He bumps his head on them as he first enters. Set designer Roger Christian claimed that he had added this detail as an affectionate homage to the fluffy dice mascot that was hanging in the car driven by Harrison Ford in American Graffiti, the previous film that the actor and George Lucas had made together in 1973. However, it was actually Ron Howard playing Steve Bolander, whose car had the fluffy dice. Ford's character, the much more edgy Bob Falfa, had a skull hanging from his rearview mirror. The metal dice don't appear in any of the following scenes. It has been said that this continuity error occurred because they were stolen from the Millennium Falcon cockpit set and not replaced. So that's kind of no no bueno, as they say. So here's the small scale. Get this up here. So this is a small scale mock-up used for model work. The rear instrument panel is illuminated by a bright halogen bulb. So yeah, as I've mentioned, that's what we're going to be doing too. And here's the original production drawings. Production drawings for the full set of what was then called Pirate Starship, dated 1976. These plans were scaled up to the size seen at the top of the page. So then they got scaled up to that. So yeah, so that was their filming set. Um, so pretty interesting. All right, there you go. That is bonus for issue 3. And hopefully you guys are still enjoying these bonus sets. And we'll continue doing them. And next, we'll have issue 4. Getting excited for that one. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.